everyone, my name is Zach and welcome back to another round analysis of my chess game that I played in my chess tournament in Germany, Münster. I am now back from that tournament as we are analyzing round 9, the final round of the tournament. This game I was paired against my biggest challenge yet in the tournament, a FIDE Master from Germany who was at his peak 2360 FIDE ELO. A FIDE Master we're talking about. And now he's 2100, still a huge up since my rating is 1876 at the time. It took me a while into my preparation to figure out that my opponent not only plays e4, but plays the Scotch game. So after knight f3, they play d4 here. And then I decided to play something I've never played before. In all my 35,000 chess.com games, I have never played this variation of the Scotch game, and I took here first. In all my games on chess.com, it's bishop c5 all the way through. Well, in this game, I go ahead with knight f6, poking at the center on e4, and really this goes into some very playable lines in which white takes, which I saw he took in previous games, FIDE rated games, so I was pretty sure he was going to take, and then I tick. And so now I'm pretty much into prep. My opponent goes to e5, which he has played previously, and I went queen e7. Queen e2 was played. Now I go knight d5, and huge names have played this. Hikaru, Nihal Sarin, huge names, okay? And so now the normal is c4, and there's a Fabi against Wesley So game that went c4, and then Wesley So with the black pieces played bishop a6. I was expecting something like this, but then knight d2, and I'm out of prep, officially. Knight d2 is an interesting move, but it's really, yeah, I go with something really sharp here. I decide to play knight b4, which attacks c2, and it gets really annoying for the white pieces really early on, because let's say queen c4, it becomes super annoying after d5 here, attacking the queen. And how do you defend this pawn more? You can't take en passant because it's pinned, and if let's say you go queen b3, I love my position, right? We're developing bishop f5 and hindering c2 again, and it's really, really nice. And let's say queen e4 here, I still have d5. You can't take en passant because there's a free queen hanging. So it becomes complicated to defend c2. The king d1 is also a horrible move. You never want to move your king out of the castling possibilities. And so now my opponent goes with the normal knight f3, just making sure they defend c2, and they continue developing their knight on f3. And so now I go with even more sharp. Maybe not the best of choices, but bishop a6 is a good enough move to really poke at this queen and bishop, being really weirdly developed here. And if the queen moves, let's say, I just take and you have no short castling rights. And I kind of dismantle the setup here for the white pieces, which is kind of the objective. And so now my opponent plays the normal looking c4. And now I go for even sharper, because this is an FM, and I gotta get him uncomfortable. But this is a small inaccuracy here. I go with d5, pressuring c4 here. And it's interesting, I saw what my opponent played now, but I still decided to go into what we go into because I still remain a pawn up, which is really, really a decision that you try not to do, or you try to do, depending on what you're going for. I'm going for super aggressive. We're trying to win the last round. I have 5 out of 8 right now, and we want to end with 6 out of 9. No budget cuts. So d5, pressuring again c4. I'm saying pressuring because it's 3 moves in a row now. Taking en passant is very mediocre because I have knight c2 check first, winning the rook. The queen is pinned, so you can't take my knight. And the king moving just makes queen takes e2 check, bishop takes, and now we take the rook and we win the exchange at least. So you don't want to take. So what do? Well, there's a3 here because my knight is trapped, but now I have bishop takes c4, winning a pawn, and attacking the queen first, forcing the queen to move. Queen d1, a really good move. You don't want to go queen d2. There's a big difference between queen d1 and queen d2. If you go queen d2 after we trade, let's say this, and I go knight a6, and you go queen here, I can just go knight here, or even like knight c5, because c7 is defended. However, if you go queen d1, then after we trade, by the way, my opponent took with the king after 5 minutes of thinking, I go knight a6, Queen a4 attacks c6, a vulnerable pawn, and now I had calculated knight b8. Believe it or not, I calculated knight b8 before I played d5. Before I played d5. I have to know that this variation works because it's all pretty much forced. And so now knight b8 defends c6 very well. But I'm up a pawn, but my opponent has a lot of really nice pieces, and again, I have problems with development. And as you see, white develops really fast. Bishop g5 attacking my queen. And on this move, ladies and gentlemen, I took around 20 minutes to figure out my next move. And this is a huge lesson for you in chess. There are two options here. I want you to choose and comment in the comments below which one you would prefer. Queen e6 or queen c5. One of them is good, one of them is bad. And I almost went for the bad one. Comment your comment. It's really easy to just think that queen c5 is gonna be a better move, and then you're gonna be bishop e7, and then you're gonna develop. Because the object is to castle quick here. As the black pieces, we wanna castle, and if we get the castling, we might just win this because we're up a pawn, and yes, we can just win. But it's really not obvious. On queen c5, I really did not like things like rook c1, even though I get to trade queens. Rook takes c7. And might I be honest, I took a lot of time on all of this lines because I was expecting queen b3 with the idea of going queen b7. But I had seen that knight d7 here, queen b7, rook here, and then queen takes, and I give back the pawn, but it's okay after queen e6. This is important for this line. On queen c5 after this move here, I was thinking of queen here to go to b7 and win my rook. But now I have queen b5 check, this and this. I have to move away from this nicely looking position to go into something that is maybe more horrifying with queen e6. And after much calculation, we're talking 20 minutes of calculating and weighing both opportunities, I go with queen e6. And although rook c1 is better for white, just flat out better, it's hard to find. It's super hard move to find. It just pressures c6, but it prepares knight d4. It's not obvious to find, and we were both just calculating knight d4, and he ends up playing knight d4. And so now this attacks my queen, and I go queen g4. I had calculated this obviously, and now white has like 4 different ways to go here. The idea of queen g4 is general here. The plan is all the same. I want to go bishop c5, attack the knight on d4, and just castle. If I can get that done, I get at least equality with my pawn up, even though they have compensation. Here, I am attacking the bishop and really nicely pinning the knight to the queen. This is super important because things like knight takes c6 are not available now, not possible. And now white has a few options. They can play f4, defending the bishop and getting out of the pin here, reigniting the threat knight takes c6. But here I had thought of, I don't know, h6. Looks really good. And if you take on c6, I have knight d7, escaping all threats. I think here there's e6 actually. e6 takes and then knight here. Okay, wait, maybe we're staying away from that. There's queen d7, there's queen d7. I had seen this during the game. It's been like a week since I played this, just for your information. So yeah, so on f4, I had h6 and development. Or I had bishop here, and if you take, I just have queen d7 and we're fine. Like bishop c5 and developing is completely fine in this position. There is also h4. h4 on h6 is good, but I like bishop c5 because now we can really target the knight on d4. And it's not obvious. Do you play bishop back or do you go rook d1 to defend the knight? And now I can just castle and be up a pawn. After queen g4, it's not obvious. Rook c1 is again really a good choice, but there's not many options here. If you move the bishop, another really interesting variation, I go with bishop c4, bishop c5, just attacking that d4 piece, and it's not obvious how white continues. You can't take the pawn once again. And on bishop d2, bishop c5 becomes even better. We're just attacking the piece. And now my opponent goes for something that I didn't see, none of these options, and he goes with f3, a piece sacrifice to take on c6. And here, might I say, I have like 48 minutes on my clock. We're at move 16, and I have 48 minutes on my clock. And here I go with queen takes g5. taking the piece and sacrificing c6. Now on knight takes c6, I had calculated all of this to make sure that I was okay. I have knight d7, and I think my opponent missed this. I'm not sure, because there's just nothing here for white. There's no direct win. You can try e6, sacrificing a pawn to open things up here, but I can defend this, like, really easily. Or I can just give the pawn, whatever works. And so after knight d7, my opponent goes for rook d1, just attacking a pawn. I have options here to defend. Try to come up with an option for black, comment it down below. At first I was loving knight b6, but I was finding trouble castling if my knight went to b6. And although it is the best move by a little, I found the second best move here, which is really, really nice, because it not only counteracts with what white is doing, but it also does something for me at the same time. You see, the knight going here, yes, it attacks them, but I'm not developing my position. I'm not getting my pieces out. Whereas bishop c5, which is what I played, not only counteracts against rook takes c5, but it threatens to castle here with king safety, which would be, I would be up a piece. It would be ideal. And so here my opponent goes for the variation that I saw, rook takes d5, the only variation really that there is. And now I go with what I had prepared, which is queen c1 check. And here you don't really have time to do king e2 things. I mean, it just doesn't work, because I have queen takes h1, threatening g2, and your attack just doesn't come in time. If you want to do something like, I have check here, and then I can even take. And you can move your knight, but there's not much. There's no mates. So my opponent is forced to do queen d1 or rook d1. If queen d1, I just trade queens, and I'm up a piece. There's nothing much, right? So rook d1 is what I looked at mostly. And now I just have queen takes b2, and we're threatening mate. And this mate isn't a small threat. Sometimes mate threats are just garbage, like you defend and counterattack on the same move, but this is not one of those. There's not many ways to defend that. Except for giving a rook, there's only two viable ways that I looked at to defend this mate in this variation. There's queen h4, you can defend mate this way, but your queen is now off the defense of this knight, and with your exposed king from the king takes f1 moves ago, now you get punished with queen b5 check. And now I'm winning a piece, a second piece in this game, and after the king moves, everything holds, and I'm just winning. But there's another move. There's knight d4. Knight d4 blocks the bishop's trajectory onto f2 and stops that mate. But on knight d4, I just have castles. And I had seen this at f3. At this point in the game, I think I have 30 minutes. This is why my time is at like 0 on move like 20. Because I had seen this. This, learning from game 1. We're coming full circle in this tournament. Learning from game 1, in which I could have saved a piece with a bishop c7 resource. Go see game 1 if you forgot this. Bishop c7 resource would have saved me a piece in that game, because if the queen would have taken a piece on the same square, a knight precisely on the d7 square, I now would have had rook d8 that skewers the queen and the knight, going full circle to round 9, where I learned from my mistake and see the tactical resource in game 9 of the same tournament. And here, the queen is useless, has to move, and I recoup my piece, being a piece up, and would be threatening checkmate. Castling would win on the spot. And in this position, after queen takes b2, after only 21 moves, my opponent resigned. And I'll be back at my apartment to tell you further statistics and results of this tournament. Back at the apartment, here are the results of my tournament. So I finished with 6 out of 9, which is a pretty good score. I'm very happy with this. I was the starting rank of 83, and I finished 20th of this tournament out of 172 people in the open section, which is amazing for me. Overall, I won 53 FIDE rating points, and I had a performance of 2090. Given that my ELO is only 1871 for this tournament, but between us it's 1876 in the live ratings. The average rated opponent that I played against was 1961, which is pretty big, but also got diminished a lot due to my first and third rounds, which were very low rated opponents compared to the rest of the rounds. My best wins was a 21-13 and then a 21-06 in the last round, and then my new rating is going to be 19-12. 29 coming into my next tournament, which will be announced in a week. And finally, here are the chess.com stats. Yes, I computed every game into chess.com, put on the game review, and here are your stats from this tournament. Here we go. My opponent's average performance was 21-11. My opponent's average accuracy was 83.6 accuracy. My average accuracy per game throughout the 9 games is 85.8. My average rating accuracy per game is 2200. My opponents had 12 great moves throughout the tournament. I had 22. Nobody had brilliant moves ever. Nobody, no sides. Even though I believe Christian Gluma's 96 deserves a brilliant move, but game review did not spot it. My opponents made 3 blunders, I made 4. My opponents made 17 mistakes, I made 19 mistakes throughout the tournament. So it's going to be very important for me to look over my games and specifically the mistakes and learn from the blunders and mistakes. Thank you so much for watching, for following this tournament with me. We have cleared Germany and on to the next one. Next tournament will be announced very, very soon.